Okay, we are ready to continue. Again, we have a new student board member, Georgia Blackwell. Welcome her again. I will like to appoint her as ex officio member of the Agency Operations Committee. And as I mentioned earlier, I will formally introduce her at our board meeting tomorrow. At this time, I would like to pass the gavel over to Ms. Emma Schwartz to officially call the meeting of the Agency Operations Committee to order. Ms. Schwartz.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Emma Schwartz, and I'm the chair of the Agency Operations Committee. It is 1:36 p.m., and I'd like to call the July 27th Agency Operations Committee meeting to order. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast via the internet. So before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome those watching who will be joining via Zoom and ask that they observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your microphone when not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. Members, when I call your name, please announce present. Welcome Wilson.
Present.
David Anwar. Fred Farias.
Present.
Robert Gaunt.
Present.
Zoom. Great. Donna Williams. Present. Georgia Blackwell. Present. And myself, Emma Schwartz. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Agenda item 2 is consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the April 27th, 2022 Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion for the approval of the April 27th, 2022 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Welcome. Second. And second by Donna. Any further questions? Not. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 3 is public testimony. We do not have anyone registered to testify today, so we'll go on to the next item. Agenda item 4 is approval of the consent calendar. We do not have any items on the consent calendar today, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 5A is a report on grants and contracts. This item does not require any action. Members, the reports were included in the agenda materials that you received prior to the meeting. Ms. Linda Natal, Director of Contracts and Grant Management, is available if you have any questions. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Madam Chair, Ms. Natal, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the agency? I know you've been here before, but for some of the newer board members.
Hi, my name is Linda Natal. I'm Director of Contracts and Procurements. I've been with the agency for 12 years. I actually started back in 2009 with the first stimulus package, the ARA funds. With contracts, grants, procurements for the last 2 years.
So the reason I wanted her to say that is because the board, we don't see a lot of those contracts, and her division, her area, does a lot of important work. I know with our general counsel and myself and her group, and they do a very good job to keep us all in order in terms of the contracts and the things that we do. So thank you for what you and your team do.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5B is update on the agency cybersecurity framework. This agenda item will be postponed and heard in closed session later in the agenda. Agenda item 6A is review of the fiscal year 2022 financial report to the board. This item does not require any action. Mr. Ken Martin, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, will present this item and be available to answer any questions. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Every committee meeting, I bring before the board a report, mostly financial, but also contains some non-financial information, such as loan-related data. At the January board meeting, I went through section by section for our newer board members so that they could see meaning of each section and then have a better understanding of the report. At this point, I would like to point out at the October board meeting, the board approved a bond resolution authorizing the commissioner and myself to execute the sale of tax-exempt private activity bonds for support and financial cash for the next academic year, the 22-23 academic year. And I'm happy to announce we did execute the sale. We executed the sale at the end of May. And some of the steps that we go through on that sale, we have to wait until January before we can receive from the Bond Review Board our really, the initial step is to receive a portion of the state's tax-exempt allocation. The state receives from the IRS approximately $3 billion. It's based on state population throughout the United States, so the allocation can vary. But for Texas, fortunately, since population has been growing, so has our allocation. And we receive that approval. It's on a calendar basis, so we receive that approval from the Bond Review Board in January, and then we go to rating agencies, coordinate with them to get official ratings, work on an official statement for posting for investors, and then from there we go to market, posting usually about 10 to 14 days ahead of time for investors to be able to see and then begin bidding on. We do execute on a competitive bid basis. And we were initially targeting the end of June, beginning of July. We don't want to hold on to debt earlier than necessary. But as you all know, the interest rate environment became quite tumultuous over the last couple months. And so I have a chart to show. What we did is we executed at the end of May. We pulled in the deal as early as possible because we had to wait for Bond Review Board approval. Our final step before going to market was going to the May Bond Review Board to get full board approval with all of our package, all of our information that we had, ratings, et cetera, which we did receive, and then 2 weeks later we executed on the sale. This chart here is just a depiction to give you an idea, a comparison of interest rates. You can see coordinated board in yellow, and below we have a AAA rating. So we are GO bonds, general obligations, so the state does back us on these bonds. So we basically get to take advantage. And you can see the other states that were listed here from AA to A1, and then the associated interest rates. And this is just taking a snapshot of the 2024 through 27 yield on the bonds, and just a comparison going across anywhere from 2.44, 2.79. You can see some of the states varied a little bit, all the way down that we were in the 1.9 to 1.67, so much lower than other states, which allows us to take advantage of lower cost. We can have a lower interest rate for our student loans. Next slide, please.
Hey, Ken.
And as I mentioned, the timing of the bond sale, you can see here that from March, we had considerable interest rate growth. This is the 10-year Treasury, and just over a 6-month period, and that yellow line is approximately the date that we're able to execute our sale on. We're not tied to the Treasury, but it does tend, muni bonds tend to execute very similar to Treasuries. And then you saw a substantial rise. The reason I want to bring it into May is the Feds announced in April approximately 8.4%, I believe, inflation on an annualized basis. And I saw no reason that was going to go down in May. As a matter of fact, it was almost 9% in May. So I wanted to get to the market before that announcement was coming out. And you saw what happened in June when it did. And then, the market is sometimes emotionally based, and then it came down a little bit, and it's been all over the map lately. Next slide, please.
Mr. Martin, Madam Chair, I think Mr. Gaunt is online. He might have had a question, I noticed.
Yes, Robert. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So, Ken, what was the longest duration of that offering? Was it 10 years? I know
it's
we
actually a 24-year period. We ladder our bonds, so the first 4 years are interest only, and then starting typically with either the 4th or the 5th year will be principal. So we actually have a 4-year bond, a 5-year bond, all the way through a 24-year bond. And that allows us the first couple of years, because you're going to students who are in school, who are typically not repaying on the loans. They are not an immediate repayment. Ours are deferred until you graduate. They just accrue interest. Some lenders will have where you have immediate payment. So just like a car, you bought it a month later, you're making payments. Most of those are where parents are making the payment on behalf of the student. These do not, so the student can make payments after graduation. So what we do is, because we know that cash flow stream is not coming in for a little while, yet we have to pay the debt, we're interest only essentially on those bonds for the first 3 to 4 years. And then after that, we're paying interest plus principal, paying off each successive series of bonds. We have a 10-year call on the bonds, so after the 10-year period, as some board members know, in the previous years, we've executed the call and sale on bonds and refunded, basically refinanced. We'd issue new bonds and then pay off the older bonds if interest rates were favorable, and in the past they have been substantially favorable. But it's over a 20-year period, Mr. Gant. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. What were the yields on the longer duration securities?
I don't have that in front of me, but what I can do is I can send you the actual report from our financial advisor that will have all that information, including the true interest cost over the entire series and the arbitrage yield on that as well. And since these are tax-exempt bonds, we're tied to the arbitrage yield, which is the IRS limit or baseline of where our 2% adder is factored into, and that predominantly is how we set our interest rate. But I'll be happy to send that to Mary Mitchell, and then she can forward that on to you.
Super. Thank you.
Speaking of
Thank you.
interest rate, go ahead.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Speaking of interest rates, so this shows the two academic years, fiscal academic year 21-22, and then 22-23, which going next academic year, almost our fiscal year. The count was 3.75. You can see the federal direct was typically the lowest at 3.73. But of note, once you graduate and you start making payments, you are eligible that if you have automatic drafting from your account for a 0.25% reduction, so a 0.25% reduction. So if you're a student and you had 3.75 and you had auto ACH for your payments, you would actually be at 3.5% from that point forward effectively. So you can even be lower than the federal rate. This time around, as you can see, a substantial jump in the federal rates as well as the CAL because of the inflation that has anticipate that to continue unless we see some dramatic change. I know the Feds have the potential to raise interest rates this week. We'll see what happens, but really need some things to slow down from the economic standpoint. That's the estimate. That's what they did last round.
They did 3/4.
They did.
Good. Next slide, please. So, switching gears, one of the items that's not on the financial report, but I did want to bring up, and I mentioned to our chair at a monthly call that I would bring some pictures of our new humble home starting in September. Now, this isn't the prettiest because you see still a lot of construction that's transpiring. We did do a tour July 12th. And what I like about this picture is on the left is our new building, and then in the middle is an old, is a prior state building, and then you can see the sister building, the Barbara Jordan building, right next to that. So you can see the substantial change in architecture, beauty of the building, etc. The 1801 building, the George H.W. Bush building, you can see it had a little architectural flair. It wasn't just a big cube going up. They actually did things a little bit differently. So each floor, especially at the bottom, is a little bit different in size than the top floors. The bottom floor is a little larger. The top floors, you can see, almost have wings coming out. We will be on the 12th floor, both wings, north and south wing. We'll be on the 11th floor on the north wing. We'll have 100% occupancy there. And then we have 24 slots, some offices, some cubicles, 23, on the 11 south. That'll be occupied by some other agencies coming from the Hobby building. Please. That's the front entrance, and I took that picture a little higher to try and get the fencing and all the other construction equipment out of view. Next slide. And this will be the lobby. So you can see that that's the reception desk. This is as you walk in. Off to your left, you can barely see it, but behind that blue welcome sign are, lack of a better term, turnstiles or gates. They'll be automated. You press your badge, and they'll open. You go in, and they close. So one of the security measures they have in the building, and you can see This building, what I really like about it, if you've been through some of the other state buildings, this one, if you didn't see the name, you didn't know it was owned by the state, you'd think it was more of a corporation, a corporate building than it was a state building. They really did, TFC and team did a really nice job in putting this building together and modernizing this building. So the elevators have some modern features. Next slide, please. Let's see if this one comes out. This is just a hallway between what I described as the wings. So off to the left, if you were to look out the window, would be the north is UT. You'll see the Capitol Mall down below. And let's see, to the left, if you were to look out that window, would be down to the Capitol. You'd see the extension, et cetera. And the Bob Bullock Museum is right across the street. But that's the hallway to the next wing that you can see. If you walk through that little door, you're going from one wing to the next, to the north wing as I describe it. Next slide, please. And down that hallway, approximately halfway, you have what is a break area, effectively. They'll have some refrigerators off to the left there, microwaves. There's an ice machine, sink, the countertop. And then what's not shown here is, instead of standard drinking fountains with a button and what have you, they actually have recessed water stations that are almost like, think of it as your refrigerator. So take a water bottle, they're much bigger, and push in your water bottle, and it'll fill, instead of having the old-fashioned metal, and you look through some other pretty well worn, and you wonder whether, you should even be drinking out of them. Well, I think they did an excellent job in putting those together and showing a lot more modernization. And as this shows, compared to some of the break rooms here that you see in this building. I think that's the last slide. Next slide. So I'm happy to answer any questions on either the financial report, the new building, the bond sale, any other questions.
What's the timeline for the move?
The timeline for the move, let me walk backwards. The timeline right now, if everything holds, and that's so far it is September 19th will be our first day of occupancy. Walking back, the physical move, a lot of it, like this dais and so on, starting August will be surplused. We have to work with the Facilities Commission since it's state property, and they'll surplus it, and then they decide how to dispose of the property. And then from there, we'll actually have the physical move, all the boxes, other furniture, TVs that will actually go to the new building. That will occur around September 6th through 9th. So, and then in August, we're the cubicles are being built as we speak. Approximately 50 to 60% were already completed when we were there July 12th. Our office furniture should be delivered here towards the latter part of August, and chairs as well. So people will have a place to work, sit, be functional. ISS has been working to ensure that the right LAN connections, I'm going to have this right, the right routers so that people have the wireless when necessary, are being installed. Printer locations, they've been working diligently with DIR and Facilities Commission. Hope that answers your question.
Mr. Martin, thank you for, I know that giving a lot of questions, not only from this current board, but past boards about this project for almost a couple of years and longer. But thank you for the updates, and hopefully things go smoothly. As we know, that weekend of move-in, that week of move-in is going to be a really congested area. I know another agency or group that I used to be on is going to be actually moving from the Hobby Building as well. So there'll be a lot of movement, not just us, but all the other agencies that are moving into that building. So it'll be a transition. We look forward to it. Right, new, shiny area.
Isn't there a football game one weekend? Or?
Yeah, we're hosting a little team from Alabama, and so it'll be that weekend. So we'll have a lot of extra folks from not only Texas but out other states in the area. But it'll be great. We're looking forward to it, and thank you for your team. Absolutely. And the work that y'all have done.
This move in the afternoon, the Texas Stadium will be half empty midway third quarter.
I'm going to leave that alone, but I can say that it'll actually be during the weekdays, so we'll miss that Saturday on that. I know the Facilities Commission has been experiencing some delays, as we know, with COVID, supply chain, et cetera. Our 11 South, I mentioned 23 slots. Those are delayed, unfortunately. Initially, we thought they'd be ready by September 19th with a move-in date. We received notice less than a month ago, the Facilities Commission, that due to vendor pricing, shocker, right, with everything going up and some other delays, that'll be pushed out till later next year. So we have to make some organizational seating reassignments to make sure that we can accommodate staff for those. And like I say, we're still trying to, one of the reasons I wanted to make sure we could go out as far as possible, September, was in anticipation that usually things don't go as planned. A lot of the agencies are moving in now. We have Lottery Commission and some others, and that's the environment they are walking through right now, the construction going on. So hopefully by the time we're there, a lot of that will be down. I know there's delays even getting permitting from the city. Imagine the state having to get, but they do, for, as you would well know. And so they're experiencing delays there. The parking garage is ready. They just need concrete to make the driveway from the road to the garage because there's a lot of electrical and other infrastructure below. That's where they're delaying permitting, and they don't know when they'll get the permitting. So where they have access to your own garage will be in question. That will still be coming down. But we have about a little over a month and a half. So fingers crossed. And then at the October board meeting, since this is our last board meeting here, our October board meeting will be across the street. We have secured a space for that, but what we can do is set up a tour for our board members, either before or after any one of those days, committee meetings or board meetings, walk across the street, go to the 1801 building, and tour the 12th and 11th floor.
Well, congratulations on the bond sale and getting the horse out of the barn just in time. That's no small task. So
That was not. I won't say freaked people out, but I certainly made some people jump when I made the decision early to pull it in. And so we had some hoops to jump through, and I thank the team. I have a great team on the finance side. Our financial advisor, our bond counsel, McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton, and our financial advisor, Hilltop Securities, did an excellent job being able to get this out, get it posted, get it to market as quickly.
And Commissioner, feel free to call any other agencies and offer them our used furniture if they move.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Martin. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Agenda item 7A is discussion of the audit of agency-wide financial statements for the fiscal year ended August 31st, 2021 by Kpmg. This item does not require any action. Ms. Susan Warren, audit partner, and Shannon Canals, audit senior manager from Kpmg, will present this item and are available to answer any questions. Ms. Warren.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here to present the results of the audit from 2021. And if we go to the next, we'll just jump right on in. So these are all the required communications down the left. Basically, if any of these happen, we are required to let you know as a governing body that they occurred to the audit. The good news is you see the word no quite a way down the page, and that's really what you want to see, because that means I don't have anything that's negative to report. But going down the list, the audit has been issued, so there are no outstanding items. There were no significant or unusual transactions. There was no audit differences, either corrected or left uncorrected. We didn't have any problems with the disclosures in the financial statements. The audit report is clean, unmodified is what we refer to it, but basically it's an unmodified, clean opinion. There were no other matters to our report as far as changes when we were planning, when we identified the risk and kind of our approach that did hold, and that's the way audit was executed. If you look at the financials, the note 1 has all of the accounting policies in it. So it tells you GAAP and how things have been adopted and how they've been applied. If you can't sleep at night, that's a great place to pick up. It's, for those of us not in the field, it's pretty boring. But and then the significant accounting estimates, we have a slide we'll go through here. Related parties, going concern, all that is nothing to report. Next slide, please. A few other things that we're supposed to tell you about. There were some subsequent events. You can see them listed there, all of which you are fully aware of. but they did occur after year end, so we did mention those that they were going to happen during this next fiscal year. Nothing of a significant nature other than, just needing to let readers know those were ongoing events. No illegal acts or fraud or anything like that, or control issues, nothing like that to report. None of the consultations or difficulties. Your team is wonderful to work with, very accommodating from a positive perspective. And just the written communication and the official letter is the representation letter. And of course, we are required to let you know that we do maintain our independence. What that means is we don't do gifts, we don't do lunch, we don't have relationships with any of the management team or the board members. We don't take you to baseball games and things like that. So we have to maintain our independence from that perspective. And please. As I mentioned, there is an accounting estimate, which you're well aware of, the allowance on the student loans. Some of those students, default, can't pay. And so there is an allowance up against that to basically put the fair value of those loans on your books as at the end of the fiscal year. We did walk through that, looked at the assumptions, did some IT work on it, because a lot of it's information pulled from your computer system, the historic look at those default rates, if you will, and basically concluded that management's estimate was reasonable. I think that's the last slide, but next one just to make sure. Questions?
Always great kind of report to hear.
So
if it's a great report, I can usually do it in 5 minutes or less.
Okay, so I think you covered everything.
That's a good thing.
Warren and Ms. Canal. So is there anything outside of what you said that we should be as a board aware of?
No, sir.
Okay. Well,
yes, sir.
And we are clients.
You are. Yeah, actually, because we also look at your debt covenants as well. So yes.
Great job, team. Any questions? Very much.
Thank you, as always, for your time. Much appreciated.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 7B is the auditor's update on internal audit reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Mr. Mark Pale, Assistant Commissioner for Internal Audit and Compliance, and Mr. Paul Mayer, Assistant Director, Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this item and are available for questions. Mr. Pale.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. So, item 7B, update on internal audit activities. We've completed 2 projects since our prior meeting in April. One engagement was a review of the Texas College Work Study program, and that was closed early due to anticipated changes and negotiated rulemaking for the program. So that's the type of project that we will reconsider at a future date where the timing would be more appropriate. The second project is an internal audit of the craft application. This report is accepted from public disclosure, and so we'll discuss that report with you later in executive session. I wanted to also take this opportunity to update you on our external peer review. It's good news. We're fully compliant with professional standards, so we were happy to hear that. There will be a report by the consultant that performed this work that will come to you at the October meeting. I would like to take this early opportunity to thank my team, to thank Mayor as well as the rest of the team, because as you can imagine, it's sort of a pyramid concept, and so there's a ton of work that goes into keeping us compliant and on the straight and narrow, and so they do a really remarkable job. So I'd like to give them a shout out at this time. Short report today on internal audit activities. We will have the executive session here for the one report, but happy to answer any questions.
Congratulations on the peer review. I
Thank
did
you.
speak to the consultant. He was thorough. So if you all did well, that's a testament to your good work.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, moving on to agenda item 7C then. It's consideration and possible action to adopt the annual internal audit plan for fiscal year 2023.
Thank you. So for this item, we're requesting approval of the internal audit annual work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. More details of the plan are in your blue page and the annual plan document that you have in your materials. In the interest of time, we've put together a few slides with highlights from the plan, and then I'll be happy to respond to any comments or questions. Next slide. First, I'd like to provide an overview of our department. As you can see, we have a total of 12 FTE in the internal audit and compliance area, and we divide that into three silos: internal audit, state compliance monitoring, and federal compliance monitoring. We have 2 FTE that are specifically in the internal audit area, and this plan is really crafted or built on those resources for the internal audit team. Next slide, please. So the internal audit plan represents our evaluation of the highest risk as required by state law and professional standards. The plan is developed with a systematic and collaborative approach, relying on both numerical or quantitative information, as well as extremely important qualitative information. That evaluation resulted in identified 2 high-risk areas and 4 other areas on this year's plan. The 2 highest risk areas are noted, or you would note that they're the same area that's on this year's plan. Those areas are information security and the administration of federal funds, which you continue to be briefed in multiple ways about the different initiatives that our agency has in these areas, and just the continuing importance of the cybersecurity landscape. So our plan is to continue to provide review and advising in these areas as they continue to develop, and we appreciate management's cooperation and receptiveness in review of in light of the significant work that we're conducting in these areas. Other areas in the plan that we've identified from stakeholder input includes a review of the Talent Strong Texas Strategic Plan, as well as procurement and P-card, our procurement card system. So a purchasing review, and then some common areas that we have on the plan are corrective action implementation, investigations, external audit assistance, and self-assessment. Please. A few additional thoughts before we pause for questions on the plan. We try to be stakeholder-centric and certainly to add value with this plan. So we work very closely. I know that we have spoken with many of the people in this room. We visit with Kpmg, with the State Auditor's Office, and others as we put this together. There are 2 areas that we want to continue to be mindful of. First, I would like to mention that there's a department or program risk assessment process that is continuing to evolve. So these assessments identify key objectives and roadblocks on a department and program level. So this is management evaluating their own risks using their own subject matter expertise. And going through this process can help inform management and can be used to identify significant issues, risks, and correspondingly, the control systems that are to be in place to manage those significant risks. The second area to be mindful of is, the user access, and we'll have more discussion of that this afternoon. But we continue to look not only at our applications, but our network systems, and just the administration of passwords, and you constantly briefed on just the valuable data that this agency is harboring and continuing to move forward and sharing with other groups and stakeholders. And so we want to be very much plugged into those processes and providing input as to the appropriate risk mitigation for that topic area. So I'll conclude with that, with those remarks, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So it seems like you put a lot of work into developing this plan, and you use the word risk various times in there. Do you have a formal risk management, ERM, enterprise risk management system, process, policy?
Yes, thank you for that question. So the risk management process, as far as management is concerned, as recently as I believe within the last week, we had a presentation by our Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Ken Martin, presented on this concept. Organizations are at various points on the spectrum of maturity in terms of enterprise risk management. Our program is still in the somewhat formative stages. So Mr. Martin shared with the team a tool that can be used for management to help them evaluate their own risks, identify the objectives that each area is trying to achieve, and then what are the risks in terms of achieving those objectives and controls that should be in place with respect to each of those objectives. So trying to make it as a meaningful process, but also a simplistic process, right? Because cumbersome, it will fail. So it's poised to move forward in that manner, but Commissioner Ken Martin, someone else may want to chime in as well.
Madam Chair, we back in 2014, Mark Pale identified in an audit that the agency really needed to have more robust risk management. Of sponsoring organizations, COSO had a framework that was updated in 2013, and we attended training on that and sought to implement a process. So what is risk management? How do you roll it out? How do you get everybody on board? As I mentioned to the team the other week, it's not a finance thing. Yes, we have controls in finance. You've heard all the accounting speak of that for many years, for decades. But lately, it comes about, COSO is really about organizations looking within their organizations from the top down and identifying, one, what's your accepted level of risk? Everybody has risk. We have risk when we drive a car. So what's your level of risk in transactions and bond transactions, et cetera? And then also within our program. So we've rolled out a template, tried to simplify it as best as possible, get it to the experts in the divisions who oversee those, and then, as Mr. Pale said, have various facets within the programs with the intent that this would be performed in each one of our major programs every 2 years. So I rolled this out to specifically identified initiatives and programs. We had an August due date. We'll have a September due date and an October due date for these. This is just the first tranche. This is the first wave to try and get momentum, to get this implemented, get teams ready for it. My team has already performed this a year and a half ago for Dr. Conteropoulos, you saw earlier, who presented throughout all our financial aid programs, loan program, and we also did many with finance, but now it's kind of how do we bring that out to the rest of the
On a bank board that I'm on, we've recently gone through this process and getting a lot more formal and in-depth with this. I'm curious, you feel like audit kind of led the process, but management was really crucial in determining the risk tolerance. Then we got the board involved to see whether the board's risk tolerance was the same as tolerance. And for the most part, we were on the same page. There were some interesting discussion items. So I know that this board is a little different. What do you see as the board's role in determining risk tolerance and oversight?
Well, a couple things. So one within the COSO framework is really top-down approach. It really stresses that it comes from the board, comes from the commissioner on down, and they look for that. Auditors look for that. So you see that Kpmg interviews particular board members to walk through and ask various questions and what have you. That's a start. And then also, you know, the agency has its level, and then the answer isn't necessarily, the difficult part. It's not necessarily specific across the agency that you can set one level, because you really look at each individual program, each individual activity, initiative that the agency is performing, and a risk level can be different for each one of those. So I don't know that I can give you an answer that here's exactly what the board needs to be. I certainly, and Commissioner and Mr. Pale, welcome board input on what, you know, the various items. You've heard various discussions over the years of things that we do, and if you have any input on that's really important, what have you, you'll hear discussion about cybersecurity. Obviously, there's some risk, and there's also board feedback, and that's why we have those particular items. So all of that is about the process of soliciting board input on these, and your opportunity to let us know if we're not meeting that, or if you have different thoughts that we need to do. And as we talked about before, I think Mr. Farias had mentioned this, you know, funding. Funding becomes a key issue, is being able to have funding to be able to do certain things, cybersecurity initiatives. You'll hear some more tomorrow in our LAR with some exceptional item requests on those. So how do you balance funding? How do you balance limited funding? How do you balance risk, tolerance, and meet expectations? And we're certainly open to input on any one of them.
And I would just add to what Ken Martin is saying. You know, you try to move, I think, from a theoretical discussion to a practical discussion. And so I think in this initial evaluation, because Ken, you know, mentioned his group went through this already a couple of years ago, and I think when you actually go through the process of identifying, okay, for my area, here's the 6 things that I want to be able, you know, to make sure that we achieve, and then here's the risks related to achieving those. So when you actually go through that process, you start to identify gaps, right? And it's like, okay, we don't really have necessarily sound mechanisms, perhaps because of funding, perhaps because of other reasons. But when you start then to talk about those gaps or those exposures, it becomes more real. And I think it can then become a more engaging discussion about what's needed in order to fill in some of those gaps. So I would expect a continuing dialogue, certainly need the input of the commissioner and the board to make sure that this is rigorous, and at the end of the day, that it's meaningful.
Resources, there's 2 levels of resources. One is the resources you would need to do an adequate risk assessment. Then the second one is dealing with all the risks that are identified, right? So how are you in those?
Well, in training I attended in Denver, COSO put on various training nationwide, and I think it was back around 2015, 16, a 4-day training session to become COSO certified. And what I found very interesting in the training is the individuals have lunch and be able to speak with them. Corporations set up groups, dedicated groups just for this. Now, these are large public entities. They had to adopt this framework much earlier than us because they're public requirement, either SEC or what have you. We don't have that luxury. So it really becomes us, and with the intent of trying to manage our risk on our own. And that's what Mark, myself, and team are working through, is how do we help now the divisional teams do the same and execute, and that's what we've been trying to do. So from a resource standpoint, I'd love to say we need about 3 people and this and this and this and so on, but in the scope of what we have and the resources that are available, you know, I think we can get a lot done. I also look at it as, let's say you bring 3 people on board, they don't know the programs, they don't know the details, so they really still need divisional input. So a lot of the information comes from the division, the program managers, the subject matter experts, very people who manage these, and that's what we're looking for. Plus, we want those people to understand the risk, controls, things that they're changing. It's easy to have somebody else do it, and you say, well, it's not my problem. Well, you're the program manager. You're the program director. It is your problem. This is your initiative. This is what you control, and you have the ability to make changes and manage the risk appropriately. So it's, a lot of it for us, I believe, is informing the agency on this so that it truly becomes an agency-wide initiative, a finance initiative or an internal. But I'll take 3 additional staff.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
A comment, being probably the tenured member of this board, since you're going back to some dates I recall when I started in 2015, and Mark and your team have done a really good job, and Mr. Mayor's here, and I know Mark, leadership of a team that I know that a few years ago we were really pushing hard to help Mark get more staff, and because this is a very important area, and I've seen over the years, 8+ years now, how we're even getting better, but it does take time, and these were discussions were started years ago, and now we're seeing, because of the demands and the requirements, all that's placed upon the agency, do a top-notch job, and it's our responsibility to do that. So I also, Ms. Schwartz, had a meeting with the doctors about a bank putting on exactly with all the problems going on with cybersecurity and with the bank and the risks and stuff as well. So we recently went to down in my area for the same reasons. So it's top of mind, and we've got to always be aware of it.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay, we do need a motion to adopt the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2023. Wilson, a second?
Second.
By Dr. Farias. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 8A, 1 through 7, are auditors' updates on state and federal compliance monitoring reports and activities. These items do not require any action. We have Mr. Hill and Mr. Mayer.
Thank you again, Ms. Schwartz. For this, actually the next 2 items, I will ask Mr. Mayer.
Thank you, Mr. Pale, Chairman and committee members. For state compliance monitoring, we completed 7 projects since our prior AOC meeting in April, and each of the reports are included in your materials. I'd like to highlight just 2 of these reports. The first is a desk review of formula funding at Vernon College. This report includes an observation regarding information security controls. In particular, Vernon College had not previously conducted an information security review as required by Texas Administrative Code, Section 202. However, we recently confirmed with them that they have scheduled that review for August of 2020. Next, I'd like to highlight a review of Perkins grant-related inventory policies at Coastal Bend College. This review was conducted in response to a verbal complaint, and we found that the college to be in substantial compliance with relevant Perkins grant asset and equipment rules and regulations, and they were very cooperative and receptive to our review. We did note 2 observations for improvement. First was a need to better document disposal of fixed assets, and the second observation was to provide centralized inventory control for better control of receipt, verification, distribution, and disposal of inventory and equipment. With that, I'll move on to the federal compliance monitoring portion, and with that, I would like you to direct you simply to the details that are in the blue page. I don't have much more to add than that. I would note that we continued with subrecipient monitoring reviews, and it developed an additional summary checklist that directed to subrecipient monitoring documentation, and we have initiated a review of the status of our current documentation at the agency for our federal grant programs. That concludes my compliance monitoring update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayer. Agenda item 8B is consideration and possible action to adopt the annual state compliance monitoring plan for fiscal year 2023. Mr. Pale and Mr. Mayer, once again.
Go ahead. Thank you, Chair and committee members. We are requesting approval of our state compliance monitoring annual work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. More details of the plan are in your blue page, and the annual plan document is also in your materials. But in the interest of time, we're providing a few slides with highlights from our plan, and then respond to any comments or questions that you might have. Slide, please. First, I'd like to briefly revisit our overview of the department. As noted in the internal audit plan discussion, we have a total of 12 FTE in our department, and on 3 primary areas, as we've noted before. And here you can see that state compliance monitoring has 5 FTE. Slide, please. Like the internal audit plan, this compliance monitoring plan uses a systematic process looking at both quantitative and qualitative information and seeking information from various sources. Our compliance monitoring plan covers 3 statutorily defined areas. First, formula funding data review, which is approximately 24% of our plan. And then next is our state financial assistance fund compliance reviews. That's approximately 41% of the time that we spend. And these reviews are a greater portion of our plan due to a larger number of institutions that receive state financial aid as opposed to those that receive formula funding. Larger gamut of tools. Lastly, the third statutorily defined area is compliance with Texas sexual misconduct related reporting, which is approximately 22% of our plan. We also allotted time for the follow-up recommendations, self-assessment, quality assurance, and that makes up the remaining 13%. Lastly, we'd like to provide some additional information considered in the development of the plan. First of all, although qualitative factors are considered, state compliance monitoring is more quantitative-centric. So it's compliance-based. It's more quantifiable across institutions. We're dealing with financial aid dollars, formula funding dollars. In addition, we have very specific statutory requirements that are required as part of it, the risk-based development. And you can see that those 6 state-required or statutory-required categories below. First of all, I'd like to note that there's 2 primary ones that make the biggest impact. Primary drivers are first listed item, which is the amount of funds received by the institution, and the 4th item, how recent we were at the institution. Other ones do factor in, but those are the primary drivers of how often. That concludes our discussion of the plan, and would be happy.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to adopt the annual state compliance monitoring plan for fiscal year 2023? Moved, Donna, by Ms. Williams, a second by... Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any no? Thank you. We will now take up items 5B, update on agency cybersecurity framework, and item 9, internal security audits, including results of the customer relationship and feedback tracking, or CRAFT system, in executive session. The committee will meet in a closed meeting to deliberate the following matters. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076, the committee will meet in closed session to discuss the results of the agency's cybersecurity framework assessment and internal security audits, including results of the customer relationship and feedback tracking system. No other business on the committee will be discussed before we reconvene in open session. Time is 2:29 p.m. Members of the public, at this time we request that you vacate the room so that the committee can meet in closed session. A member of staff will notify you when you are able to rejoin the meeting. Board members, please remain on the Zoom call while staff assign you to the executive session breakout room. Please be patient, as it may take a moment before you see the pop-up message asking you to join the virtual breakout. You will automatically be moved into the executive session as soon as you click on the Join Breakout Room button. Thank you very much. Okay, the executive session has concluded and no action was taken during executive session. Time is now 2:55 and the committee is now reconvened in open session. And just in time to conclude the Agency Operations Committee meeting. The time is still 2:55. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?